And the first time they ever met her, she was burning somebody's clothes outside of his apartment, her ex-boyfriend.
God. I can't say I haven't done that.
Wait.
We're learning so many things. Former defense investigator, licensed private investigator, Laura Bricker.
And certified psycho.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On, the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And this week, the brutal murder of a college student in 2005 shook Austin, Texas. Now, two journalism students revisit the case. We'll review the new hit podcast, The Orange Tree. Joining me to get that done is my real-life husband and true crime co-author, former TV journalist, and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
Also with us is journalist, true crime author, licensed private investigator, certified cat lady, and the one most likely to get enraged by wrongful convictions and injustices, Laura Bricker. Hello, Laura.
Hello, Rebecca.
And finally, the author behind the noir novels known as the City Trilogy, host of the Strange Arrivals podcast about UFOs, and our favorite doubting Thomas, Toby Ball. Good evening, Toby.
Good evening, Rebecca.
All right, well, let's get right into the podcast review, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right.
Let's do something different for a change.
Not chit-chat about a bunch of stuff that no one cares about. All right, let's do it. In August 2005, Austin, Texas college student Jennifer Cave went out with friends to celebrate her new job. But when she failed to show up for work the next day, relatives found her dismembered body in the apartment at the Orange Tree Condos. Jennifer's car was found at the home of her old boyfriend, Colton Petaniak, but he and his friend Laura Hall had fled to Mexico. The new podcast, The Orange Tree, revisits the crime that resonates with college students at UT Austin 15 years later. What makes The Orange Tree different is the 7-part series is not the work of a major publishing house or public radio station. It's written and produced by students at the University of Texas. This look at the Cave murder is well-researched, but is it ready for prime time? Well, I guess that's what we're going to talk about, right? First, I want to talk about this case. Jennifer Cave, her body found in the bathtub of Colton Petaniak's apartment, this college rental apartment, and, found by her mom's boyfriend. Her body had been horrifically mutilated after, of course, she'd been missing. Kevin, it's not hard to understand why students at UT Austin all these years later still talk about this murder, right?
Yeah, because it's essentially a young person on young person violent act. A lot of people, when they get interested in crime, true crime, part of it is because they, worry about the boogeyman serial killers, those sort of invisible people in the shadows, and that strikes up some kind of interest in them. Mm-hmm. And here's a case where, as our hosts talk about, for people of that age who hang out with people of that age, they find it hard to fathom that, another 20-something could do that.
Right.
And so, and it's just the level of violence used in this crime is such that, yeah, people are going to remember it. I
think another thing that makes it memorable and an interesting crime story is the dynamics of Colton and his potential collaborator, Laura. Now, Laura, we hear about, Laura's, kind of being obsessed with
Good Laura transition, by the way.
I'm doing my best.
She's got a U, Anata, L-A-R-A, yes.
She does have a U, but we all know Laura at some point. I'm just going to start calling you Laura anyway. So, Laura.
That's okay, yes.
We hear about Laura Hall and Colton fleeing to Mexico right after this crime was committed. And there's a lot of question about her involvement, whether or not she was obsessed with him and sort of following along and just kind of, doing what he wanted her to do just to have a little bit of time with him, or because she was also afraid, or whether or not she was more deeply involved, perhaps a perpetrator in the actual murder. Don't you think that's another thing that makes this story stand out a little bit?
Yeah, it's definitely the dynamic between the two of them. And as I was listening to this description of her, going on the run with him and the obsession, I have to say I flashed back to my own college days because we all had friends who became obsessed with somebody like this in college.
Oh, totally.
And I
100%.
was thinking about
And ran off to Mexico.
didn't run off to Mexico. I'm not going to tell tales, but I was thinking about this and like, I could really understand that sort of college dynamic, and he's like the good-looking fraternity guy. He's super popular, and she is wanting any attention she can get from him. So when he needs her help, whatever level of involvement she did or didn't have, you could really see how it played out, where she's like, now, I mean, it sounds horrible. I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's like, she's like, here's my opportunity to help him out. And they had these glorious, whatever it was, 6 days.
6 days. Yeah.
And I was just like, it's horrible and morbid. And
Most people can't afford 6 days in Mexico.
Yeah.
Well, didn't he?
They drove there.
Yeah, and he had some means. But I definitely could visualize, it didn't take a lot for me to sort of grasp that sort of dynamic and that relationship, especially at a college level, with this girl really having this thing for this guy and then doing this whatever. I still have some questions about who did what, but I could totally see how that played out.
Now, Toby, it's difficult for me to I think that the podcast is really, and I think people in the podcast really sort of point to Laura as a very troubled person. We do hear in her own words that she, is very angry. She seems to have a very skewed sort of version of not just the case, but kind of the world. We hear her later in the podcast in those prison tapes and so forth. And she's, got a lot going on. We also hear someone else in the podcast mention the first time they ever met her, she was burning somebody's clothes outside of his apartment, her ex-boyfriend.
God. I can't say I haven't done that.
Wait.
We're learning so many things.
It's
Is it
nonstop.
just Laura's?
Laura was like, I knew of someone, a friend, who fled to Mexico in college with their drug dealer boyfriend.
Oh, my God.
Oh, boy. Former defense investigator, licensed private investigator, Laura Bricker.
And certified psycho.
Not anymore. I'm on the up and up now.
But, Toby, I do find it difficult. I mean, I am the parent of teenage kids. I've been a teenage kid. I've written a couple of books in which teenage kids were central to crime stories. It does feel in some ways it's tempting to sort of cast them as these big characters, but it also feels kind of unfair because at the heart of it, they are also like undeveloped, undercooked people when they're teenagers. You know what I mean? Like, I feel conflict there.
Like, she clearly, she's making decisions that looking back on it might not make a whole lot of sense. Because even in sort of the most generous reading of her actions, it's, you murdered this girl and dismembered her. Let's get out of here and go to Mexico together. It's just such an odd, like, let's not call the cops. Let's go on the lam. It's an odd reaction,
Yeah.
And even if, I would think the first thing is get the hell away from him,
Right.
But that apparently wasn't the instinct.
And yet they get a jailhouse interview with Colton.
Yes. That was remarkable, I thought.
Yeah.
Only interview he's ever given.
What do you think of him? How do you think that he held himself up?
I find Colton to be all right.
Full of fecal matter?
Take this in the way that I intended. He's not that complicated, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was admittedly high on all kinds of drugs when this death occurred, including crystal meth, among other things, right? He had a defense which confounded me at his first trial, where his lawyer, who I don't know why they're going after all these other habeas things when it really should be like the incompetence of the defense attorney who put his defendant on the stand and had him admit that he killed the victim while pleading not guilty in a murder trial. Crazy. Like, I don't get that. But I also don't think Colton is particularly interesting.
Did he plead not guilty?
That part wasn't 100% clear, but the whole idea was like if there was reasonable doubt about first, because
the defense was that he wasn't in his right mind.
He was not guilty because it was first-degree murder was the only charge that the judge would allow. So he was pleading not guilty to first-degree murder is what was going on.
But he was trying to say he didn't remember it, right? Like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But he was on the stand saying like I did it. So anyway, that aside.
No, he said it must have been me.
Yeah. That aside.
Yeah.
His parents seem very nice. He seems like a kid who was nice and on the right track until he got involved with a lot of drugs and is now really grasping at any reason that maybe I am reinventing who I was at that time and that I didn't do it. I find it very unlikely that he did not actually commit this murder. I find it very unlikely. But, that's my opinion. I don't know. I wasn't there, obviously. But Laura, you think he's full of doo-doo, caca? Is that what you're trying to say over there?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He is full of fecal matter. Yes.
Poopy?
Yeah, exactly. It just
What's that guy's name at Facebook, right? Who was help censoring
Wayne?
this for us? Helping us with the curses.
Oh, Wayne. Yeah.
Hey,
He's like,
Wayne.
that's right. Doo-doo.
Okay.
Peace out, Wayne.
I'm just saying.
Number 2.
Yeah.
Deuces.
All right.
Sorry,
Hold
Laura.
on. No, that's okay. So, in listening to, I just felt like the portrayal of Colton was somewhat naive to me because I felt like it was like we were buying into the Colton is innocent sort of defense. So in listening to him talk and listening to the clips they used of him and listening to his parents talk, like I don't doubt he was a nice kid before he went, and this all went down and happened. But I felt like listening to him talk in prison, it just didn't sound sincere to me. And I just felt like the BS meter on my, listening to this was like, yeah, no, it just, it just didn't ring true. And I felt like there was probably some in listening to this sort of, this is where maybe the maturity of the, reporters kind of came through where they, I think were like, hey, sweet, we got this interview with this guy in prison where it was like, somebody maybe that had been through this a few times might have been like, so really? Mm-hmm.
Well, I do want to talk about the podcast itself because
I have thoughts.
That's what we do. The Orange Tree is a podcast produced by 2 students. They were students at the time. Haley actually says a couple of times she was a student at the time, so I think she may have graduated. But the 2 hosts are Haley Butler and Tanu Thomas, and they are journalism students at UT Austin, and their podcast is part of a larger podcast brand that is actually a student podcast brand. And my understanding is they also got some assistance in putting this out from KUT, which is a very big and well-respected public radio station in Austin. So this is, primarily a student project. I think, judging from the notes I see on my script here, that we are in some level of disagreement about the quality of the podcast. But I do want to first throw it out there, and I think that we all agree this is an outstanding format in which to have journalism students practice journalism.
Yes.
That the reporting itself that these 2 journalism students did was solid. The sourcing is great. They had sources that other journalists weren't able to get at the time of the murder or afterwards.
Neither she nor Eddie had ever talked to the media. They ducked past reporters during the trials and have since turned down all interview requests. Until now. We got the feeling that Bridget has been waiting years to talk about her son.
Maybe we can argue about this. I think a lot of the writing is stronger than a lot of other podcasts we review, especially the writing in and out of tape. I think about Wondery podcasts and other podcasts that don't do that super well. I think there's some smoothness there. But I do think we should maybe talk about our criticisms of the podcast with the caveat that we all know this is a student-made podcast, and we are not trying to, for lack of a better phrase, punch down. We want to give it the critique that a hit podcast deserves, but also with the acknowledgement that students made it. Are we all in agreement on that?
Yes.
No.
Big caveat.
Toby's like, no.
Well,
Toby's
I honestly, I thought about this while I was
Toby.
While I was driving back, and I think it's almost doing them a disservice by by saying, well, we're going to grade you on a slightly different scale because you're young or your students or whatever. I think some of the criticisms of it that we'll probably bring up are because they're young. But I think, I don't know. I feel like it's good enough that it can, withstand
it can take it.
our
I
usual
actually agree with you.
criticism. So
Listen, I'm just trying to protect them from Kevin. That's what I'm trying
okay.
to do. I'm just kidding.
It's the
He's the school bully. in
I'm
the
not
room.
doing
Kevin,
the
I don't know. I'm probably there too, but
It's
I'm
Laura Bricker.
It is.
No, it's Laura.
It is. I'm gonna
Laura.
burn clothes and torch everything.
Let's get right into it. Let's each talk about something about the podcast that wasn't good. Let's take turns. Kevin, you go first.
Okay. First of all, props, though, because the amount of news gathering that these journalists did was fantastic.
Yep.
So the raw material is there. I wonder kind of, what all that tape would have been like if you were to give it to some seasoned journalists at Wondery or Gimlet or, iHeart or wherever else. The audio mix is horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, on the tech side, I can just tell you, if you have to turn it up and then 10 minutes later turn it back down because it's too loud now, that's just inexcusable as far as an audio format.
Okay.
And I feel like, can I keep going
No,
or do I
we're
have to
gonna do
stop?
round robin.
Oh, round robin. Okay.
Toby?
Audio mix is bad.
Toby, thoughts?
a thing that kind of turned me off, and I thought it got better as it went on. At the beginning, is there is this thing about they say again and again, we wanted to make this sensitively, and they also in the first episode say, we don't, some of these other podcasts that we don't really like the way that they're sensationalist or something to that extent.
Crimes like this one have been explored time and time again for entertainment value.
Crime coverage can be sensational and insensitive. Sometimes the true crime genre can reduce a victim's life to their last few minutes. We didn't want to do that.
And it's literally like 30 seconds after they've described a headless corpse in a bathtub. And my feeling is just freaking report it sensitively. Like people will get it.
Yes.
You don't have to say
announce
that.
yeah.
I mean,
I found that excruciating.
And I think that's, again, I mean, that was actually something that I felt like it kind of had to overcome as I was listening to it. So anyway, that's
I kept
that's
thinking
my
to
go.
myself, Toby, like, what adult made them do that? That's what I kept thinking. Like, not that they're not adults. Obviously, they're young adults when they made the podcast. But I just kept thinking, like, some professor was like, "Ugh, true crime. What are the pitfalls? Make sure you talk about the pitfalls." And I'm like, some adult like made them do that and shouldn't have.
I wish there were more adults.
Oh, stop it,
Yeah.
Laura, go.
So the thing, and I'll echo what everyone said. They had great access. They had everybody they needed to talk to included in this: attorneys, family members, Colton, Laura, everybody. What I had the hardest time getting past with this was this trading back and forth narration thing that was like listening to a book report at the front of the class. It drove me so bonkers that I sometimes couldn't follow the story because I was like, oh my God, they're trading. It was like, they're like, now I'm talking. Okay, it's your turn. Now I'm talking. Okay, now it's your turn. And they were like trying to have.
It could be that because you just said two sentences back to back.
And I was just
one
like,
sentence.
it was like this, we have to be equal, we have to be equal, we have to be fair. And it was so distracting to me that I couldn't follow the story. And I'm like, okay, why don't you say, hey, for this episode, I'm going to be the narrator and I'm going to be the editor. And the next episode, you're going to be the narrator and I'm going to be the editor. Like, it just was it drove me bonkers. And I was like, why are you doing this? Because like the story, it was like told in this sort of traditional sort of true crime format where we have like, okay, here's like, the background on the perpetrators and the victims, and here's the police investigation. I mean, it had all of the right pieces, but I couldn't listen because I was just getting so distracted by this.
That works for like a TV anchor setup.
Yeah.
Where each anchor says one.
Sometimes.
And because it's 5 sentences.
Right.
And they're reading into a TV news package. If they had done more like a paragraph a piece where you have a complete idea and then when you shift to a new idea, back and forth.
There has to be a reason to switch.
Has to be a reason, yes.
We
Just
actually,
playing ping pong. Nobody does that.
Just so you know, I gave the same critique to a hit NPR podcast called White Lies that we reviewed last year, where there were two narrators.
I was recovering from surgery. I did not hear that.
Okay, so this is one of my biggest pet peeves, and it is a public radio thing. It makes me crazy, and it comes from, I believe, the origin of it and the reason that people think you should do it. It comes from like Radiolab, where Jad and Robert used to alternate a lot, or it comes from like Reply All. But the thing, it sounds terrible, and it doesn't work when there is no reason to do it other than just taking turns. They did it also in Invisibilia, a podcast that, you know, a lot of people love, but just that narration style makes me crazy. So my lesson to tack on to Laura's was only do it if there is a reason. If one of you reported part of the story, do that, or just switch different chapters or sections. But it did come across like, we're being graded on this together, so we both have to be in it the same amount. So now we're each going to talk about something we haven't mentioned before that we liked about the podcast, okay? Same thing. Quickly. I really like the writing. I said it before. I thought the writing was actually fairly strong. If you get back and beyond kind of the things we just talked about that you're hearing, this is a podcast that is better written than a lot of podcasts we have given good reviews to. Honestly, if you just listen to the way they write in and out of tape, it's done professionally. It makes sense. They do not repeat what's in the tape on either side of it. They say, you know, so-and-so went to this place, and then it cuts to the person saying, you know, the reason I would go there is because of X, Y, and Z. It was really, I thought, well done and very cleanly written. Kevin, go. Oh, come on.
Well, no, I had it. I gave the one, which was that the amount of news gathering was great. Okay. I mean, they really did a lot of great research. This is a fantastic student project. It is a fantastic, with a great name, yeah. I mean, it really is. It is not prepared well on the technical side, which maybe a lot of people don't care about. Maybe they're fine turning the volume up and down, and they don't mind that there's sound effects of someone knocking at the door.
Or the Facebook Messenger sound effect.
Oh, the Facebook thing. Oh, God.
Or that everything is written in the present tense, including the likes and dislikes of a dead person.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, eh.
Yeah.
But I know I'm supposed to be talking about good stuff, but...
That's fine. Toby, what do you like about the podcast?
Oh, well, I actually like the podcast.
Me too.
Next. I thought the flow of it's not really stuff that's, I mean, it's fairly typical stuff that we don't like about. It's not unique to this, right? I mean, it's poorly mixed or whatever. But as far as the actual journalism and the writing stuff, I mean, I don't think it's. I thought it was fine, and I thought
I have one thing that is somewhat unique to this.
What is that?
And it has to do with the journalists, because they are not seasoned. And I'm not going to say they're not immature, but they don't have a professional maturity yet.
Yep.
And there have been things like, I'm thinking of like Payne Lindsay here, young people who, when they try to portray in their writing a sense of wisdom and maturity and experience that they don't have, it just falls really short for everybody else. It seems like really tone deaf. Like this line about how she was into 4-H. It's like, yeah, 4-H. Yeah, I had to look it up too. I'm like, ha, nobody knows about 4-H?
And it wasn't even the right description.
No, Laura.
It wasn't right. It wasn't right.
Yeah,
That's not
okay.
what 4-H is.
I understand that. But I actually do think they do reveal their inexperience a few times in ways that works. I do. I think that
their inexperience?
Yes.
You mean their age and their...
They talk about only doing the podcast, for instance, because people still talk about the story. They don't try to... What Payne Lindsay would do, no offense, Donald and Payne, is he would try to manufacture some sort of connection to the case. You know, it's sort of like, I looked it up on Google, but it was only because in my heart I really wanted to solve a mystery. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a lot of manufactured connection to cases, and these two women said, we went to college here. People talk about it all the time, so we decided to look into it. All right. Well, I think we should do what we do. But before we do that, before we do our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews of the Orange Tree, if you want to hear an expanded discussion plus a bonus review of the hit podcast Nice White Parents From Serial Productions, subscribe to the Crime Writers On podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And please like and follow us right here on Facebook and Instagram, and tell us your review of the Orange Tree in the comments. Or you can join the amazing community in our official Crime Writers On Facebook discussion group. And for exclusive podcasts and more, you can join us at Patreon at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia. All right, let's do what we do. I'm going to go around the horn and ask you, panel, what you think of the Orange Tree from the students at the University of Texas at Austin, UT Austin Journalism School. Laura Bricker, thumbs up or thumbs down for you?
I hate being first sometimes. So here's the thing. I think it's awesome that colleges are devoting resources to training like future journalists in the media that they're going to be working in. You know, podcasting is a medium that wasn't even, heard of when I went to journalism school. And, it's great that we're working on this. And I think like we've just said, for a student project, this is awesome. For me, I had such a hard time with the trading of the narration. It was so distracting for me listening to the whole case that I really didn't like the podcast because of that. And it's hard because they did such a great job reporting, and they got all these people, and they had plenty of information. I think it could have benefited from some editing at some points, but I was just so distracted by that dual narration thing that I'm a thumbs down.
Okay. Toby Bo, what about you? Thumbs up or thumbs down for the Orange Tree from the journalism students at UT Austin?
I thought it was good. It wasn't perfect, but it's the same thing I say about a lot of podcasts. I feel as though if a producer had a slightly heavier hand with some of their decisions, it might have been good. But they had all the interviews with all the people they needed to. They laid out. It was a very, again, after the first episode, I found it extremely easy to follow. They did a good job of reporting what happened. They had a theory. They were able to actually have, even though you didn't hear the voice, they had an interaction with the person who they were kind of implicating as being more involved. So there's some quibbles, but I thought it was good and I would recommend it. So that's a thumbs up.
Yeah, I'm a thumbs up too. I liked this podcast. I actually thought it was as good as many of the other podcasts that we give like a thumb sideways, mine are thumbs up to. And maybe I'm giving it a couple extra points because it was created by students. I don't care. I mean, I think it's a solid piece of journalism. There were some interesting moments in it. The story was decently told. It was pretty straight, true crime. Yeah, lots of lessons that these students can learn. And, I think this project could really benefit from just some more professional mixing, as Kevin has said. But, I found it compelling. I thought the sourcing was great. Not always the easiest to listen to, but sorry, thumbs up for me.
I hate myself for hating this podcast.
Thank you, Kevin.
It's got a good name, though. It does.
It's got a great name. The news gathering is really great. It's like it's a real, prime rib, and they ended up giving us some hamburger when they were done with it. Look, I think that it came off sounding kind of amateurish, but I will say, when these journalists are a little older, 10 years from now, they're going to look back. They'll find the problems that we had with it. I'll tell you, I'm not crazy about the books I wrote 10 years ago when I look back at it.
To be fair.
Yep. Get much more critical of the things that you could have done better.
I feel the same way.
This is my review, Rebecca.
Sorry.
I think that these two journalists have a great future. I would hire them in a minute. I would have taken this stuff and had somebody with a little more experience guide them, not just with the story arc, but with the actual writing and the presentation. It is probably, it certainly overperforms as an amateur piece of journalism, getting into the top 10 charts or, whatever. It's a fantastic achievement. It's a wonderful resume tape. I'm just not finding it a really great professional podcast.
All right.
So is that a thumbs down?
What's a
Thumbs down.
down? You always told me to say it at the beginning, and you didn't do that. All right. Well, now it's time for my favorite part of the podcast, a little something I like to call the crime of
the week.
the week. There are great chase scenes. The French Connection, Bullet, and Baby Driver. But nothing as great as this chase witnessed by dozens of sunbathers in Berlin last week. A nudist was seen running after a wild boar and her piglets who had just stolen his laptop. At this particular lake, where both nudists and wild boars apparently are common, the animal had been lured by the smell of pizza and scooped up a yellow bag which contained the computer. As for the nude sunbather, let's just say he doesn't look like Steve McQueen nor Ansel Elgort. You know what I mean, right? People on Twitter know what I mean. There is a happy ending, though. For the naked man, the boar eventually dropped the laptop and made her escape. For the rest of us, the photographer caught the whole thing in a scene that will really challenge Facebook standards and practices team. Sorry, Wayne. All right, so panel, the board knew what she was doing. What was she going to do with that laptop? Laura Bricker, what do you think?
I think the boar was booking a one-way ticket out of that nudist colony to a place with more pizza.
I see. What do you think, Toby Ball? What was that boar going to do with that nudist's laptop?
I think it was going to leave a Yelp review.
Kevin Flynn, what do you think?
He's going to log on to Pork Hub.
Trade some nudes?
Update a relationship status. Now seeing someone fatter than me.
Yeah, me too. All right, that's going to do it for us. Remember to follow us right
Wait,
here
you didn't
on
answer,
Facebook.
Rebecca.
I just said trade some nudes. Come
Oh,
on.
okay.
That was my contribution. We will be back again in 2 weeks
Nice
with another
tusk.
true crime review. Nice bristles. On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for watching. We will catch you later.
Later.
You ham.